UFOs in Pensacola were something our family saw. Not regularly, but not infrequently either. I remember my first sighting. I think I was 5 or 6. The night before, I was at Inverarity Point fishing with my grandfather when he told me a story about the time my grandmother saw a big UFO. I didn't think much about it at the time. The next morning, I was going through my normal routine, getting ready for church, climbing into the car half asleep. My grandparents and I were all on the long bench seat in the front. I wasn't thinking about UFOs at all, and then we got to the bridge. There they were, plain as day, 7, maybe 8 UFOs. Green orbs floating right above the power lines. They weren't moving, just wobbling slightly. As we got closer, another one appeared at the far end of the bridge and then joined the others. I just stared. My grandfather said he was sure they were drawing power from the lines or the water flowing under the bridge. My grandmother snorted in that way she did when she thought he was talking nonsense. He sped up and we went on to Mass. That was Gulf Breeze for you.
This first-hand account was sent to me by my uncle, who grew up in Gulf Breeze during this strange chapter of Florida history. Welcome to Mysteries of the Marsh, where we uncover the Sunshine State's strangest legends, untamed histories, and forgotten chapters. I'm Samantha, an 8th-generation Floridian with a passion for stories that blur the line between fact and folklore. The Florida Panhandle has always been a place where the ordinary and extraordinary collide, where military jets share airspace with things that defy explanation, where rational people, police officers, firefighters, military personnel have witnessed phenomena that challenge everything they thought they knew about what's possible. For decades, the skies over Gulf Breeze have held secrets. Some say it's all experimental aircraft, natural phenomena, or overactive imaginations. Others insist something truly unexplainable haunts these waters. But one thing's certain. In this small coastal community, stories of strange lights and mysterious craft aren't just urban legends. They're part of the fabric of daily life. So grab your bug spray and your tinfoil hat. We're about to explore how a quiet military town became one of America's most enduring UFO hotspots, and why, long after the media frenzy faded, people are still seeing things they can't explain in the skies over the Panhandle. The Florida Panhandle has always existed on the edge of things. When the first European ships sailed into Pensacola Bay in 1559, they found a natural harbor deep enough to shelter entire fleets. The Spanish recognized its potential immediately. This was a place that could control access to the entire Gulf of Mexico. But it would be centuries before the region's true strategic importance emerged. The establishment of Naval Air Station Pensacola in 1914 marked the beginning of a transformation. The same features that had attracted Spanish galleons, the deep, protected waters of Pensacola Bay and the vast expanse of the Gulf, made it ideal for a new kind of warfare. As aviation technology evolved, NAS Pensacola grew from a modest seaplane station into something far more significant. By the 1950s, the cradle of naval aviation was training thousands of pilots each year. The base sprawled across 8,423 acres, its hangars and runways constantly humming with activity. Every Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard aviator passed through these grounds, learning to master increasingly sophisticated aircraft in the challenging coastal conditions. 40 miles east, Eglin Air Force Base added another layer to the region's military presence. When it was established in 1935, few could have predicted how crucial this installation would become. Covering 724 square miles of land, Eglin grew into one of the largest military installations in the world. The base's massive size wasn't just about aircraft. It was about testing everything from experimental planes to advanced weapon systems. The military's reach extended far beyond the shoreline. The Gulf Test Range, controlled by Eglin AFB, covered 120,000 square miles of the Gulf of Mexico. This massive stretch of restricted airspace became crucial for testing experimental aircraft and weapon systems away from civilian observation. The range gave the military something invaluable: space to operate without scrutiny. NAS Pensacola's influence was perhaps most visible in its most famous residents, the Blue Angels. The Navy's elite flight demonstration squadron made the base their permanent home in 1954. Their distinctive blue and gold FA-18 Hornets became a common sight in the Panhandle skies, practicing their precision maneuvers over the Gulf waters before dazzling audiences across the country. This concentration of military activity fundamentally shaped the communities along the coast. Gulf Breeze, caught between NAS Pensacola and Eglin AFB, became home to thousands of military families, civilian contractors, and defense industry workers. The sound of jet engines and the sight of aircraft in formation became as routine as sunrise. Local businesses adapted to the rhythm of military paydays and training schedules. Schools filled with the children of pilots and engineers. Even the real estate market reflected the steady stream of military personnel rotating through the area. By the 1980s, the Panhandle had evolved into one of the most militarily active regions in the country. Radar installations monitored the skies, while sophisticated tracking systems watched for anything unusual over the Gulf. The area's residents lived with constant reminders that their quiet coastal community played a crucial role in national defense, and that not everything happening in their skies could be publicly explained. While the Panhandle's military presence made it uniquely suited for unusual aerial activity, Florida as a whole was no stranger to unexplained phenomena in its skies. In August 1952, West Palm Beach became the center of national attention when Scoutmaster D.S. Sonny DeVergers reported a close encounter in the woods. The case, extensively documented in Project Blue Book, included physical evidence, burns on DeVergers' arms, and scorched grass at the site. The Air Force investigation that followed remains one of the most thorough official examinations of a UFO report in American history. Throughout the 1960s, Florida's Space Coast added another layer to the state's aerial mysteries. As NASA launched rockets from Cape Canaveral, reports of unexplained lights and objects in the sky increased. Military pilots, civilian aviators, and ground observers around Kennedy Space Center documented phenomena that didn't match known spacecraft or aircraft behavior. The concentration of aerospace expertise in the area meant these weren't just casual observers. These were people who knew exactly what should and shouldn't be in Florida's skies. The 1970s brought a wave of sightings across South Florida. In 1973, police officers in Dade County tracked an unidentified object for several hours, coordinating with local air traffic control to confirm no registered aircraft were in the area. Around the same time, crews of commercial flights reported strange lights pacing their aircraft between Miami and Tampa. Incidents documented in both FAA records and airline reports. Florida's geography seemed to attract these incidents, with coastline on 3 sides and some of the busiest air corridors in the country. The state offered plenty of opportunities for unusual observations. The mix of military installations, NASA facilities, and major civilian airports meant Florida's skies were among the most carefully monitored in the nation. Yet, even with all of this oversight, or perhaps because of it, unexplained phenomena continued to be documented. Pensacola wasn't immune to the strange happenings in the sky. On February 6, 1975, Marine Corps Reserve Squadron Captain Larry Jividan was flying a routine training mission on a T-39D Sabre liner out of Pensacola Naval Air Station. a decorated Vietnam War veteran who had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism under fire. Jivedin was exactly the type of witness whose testimony carried significant weight. As the Sabreliner returned from its 2-hour evening flight, something extraordinary interrupted the routine mission. A circular red light appeared, seemingly pacing the aircraft with impossible precision. When Jivedin radioed Pensacola approach control to inquire about the unidentified traffic, controllers reported seeing nothing on their radar except Jivedin's own aircraft. On the radio, every time the guy would push the mic button, you'd hear people in the background chattering about it, Jivedin would later recall. They were very concerned and excited that they couldn't see it on their radar, and they wanted to know what we were seeing. Curiosity overcame caution. Jivedin turned toward the mysterious object, watching in disbelief as the red light performed a maneuver no known aircraft could execute, suddenly jumping from one position to another with impossible speed and precision. Flying underneath the object, he confirmed it was surrounded by stars. When he flew over it, he could distinctly see its silhouette against the darkening waters of the Gulf of Mexico. After what seemed like an eternity but was actually only 5 minutes, the object accelerated westward, speeding out over the horizon and vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Upon landing, Jivedin filed an official report about the incident. And we never got any further feedback on the event, he would later say. For decades, he kept the story to himself. By the mid-1980s, Floridians had grown somewhat accustomed to reports of eerie lights and unexplained aircraft. Local newspapers regularly carried stories of unusual sightings, typically treated with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The state's reputation for weird news meant that many reports were dismissed as just another Florida oddity. But what was about to happen in Gulf Breeze would be different. When Ed Walters first spotted something unusual hovering near his home in November 1987, he couldn't have known he was about to spark one of the most extensively documented and hotly debated UFO waves in American history. It was a warm evening in Gulf Breeze on November 11, 1987. Ed Walters, a local building contractor, was working in his home office when a strange glow outside his window caught his attention. Stepping outside, he was confronted by a sight that would change his life and the history of his small town forever. Hovering just 150 feet away was a craft unlike anything Walters had ever seen. It was about 30 feet in diameter with a domed top ringed with rectangular windows. A ring of brilliant blue lights pulsed around its center. But what struck Walters most was the absolute silence. Despite its size and proximity, the object made no sound at all. In a moment of remarkable composure, Walters ran back inside, grabbed his Polaroid camera, and began snapping photos. Over the next few minutes, as the craft moved even closer, he managed to capture it from multiple angles. The photos, which Walters would later share with the Gulf Breeze Sentinel, showed a level of detail almost unheard of in UFO photography. The craft's metallic surface, the geometric patterns of its windows, the arrangement of lights on its underside. The Sentinel published Walters' photos on November 19th. The story, written by reporter Dwayne Cook, thrust Gulf Breeze into the global spotlight almost overnight. The images were too clear to dismiss as a hoax, too detailed to explain away as natural phenomena. Walters' sightings continued. On December 2nd, he photographed this same craft, this time with a beam of light emanating from its underside. His photos, which the Sentinel continued to publish, showed the object from different angles on different nights, revealing consistent details that would be hard to fake. As word spread, others in Gulf Breeze began coming forward with their own stories. Well-respected members of the community, people with reputations to uphold, were risking ridicule to report what they had seen. Scott Zepp, a local businessman, described a silent craft drifting over his property, moving in ways that defied conventional flight. Denise Boone and her daughters reported a spinning object hovering above the trees near their home. Gulf Breeze City Councilman Broxson came forward with a story of multicolored lights over the water that vanished in an instant. The growing wave of sightings attracted the attention of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, at the time the world's largest UFO investigation group. In December, MUFON dispatched a team led by investigators Walt Andrus and Charles Flanagan to look into the Gulf Breeze phenomenon. For over 2 weeks, Andrus and Flanagan interviewed witnesses, analyzed photographs, and staked out sighting locations. They examined Walter's camera and original photos, finding no evidence of tampering. The level of detail in the images, they concluded, would be extremely difficult to fake. As news of the sightings spread, Shoreline Park became a nightly gathering spot for skywatchers, hoping to catch a glimpse of something otherworldly. Residents set up lawn chairs and cameras, scanning the skies for any sign of the strange lights that had become the talk of the town. Many reported seeing the same things Walters and others had described: silent, glowing objects that moved in ways no conventional aircraft could. The media frenzy grew as the sightings continued. The Pensacola News-Journal, Tampa Tribune, and Associated Press all sent reporters to cover the events unfolding in the small Panhandle town. Regional papers and national tabloids picked up the story, splashing Walter's photos across their front pages. Gulf Breeze residents found themselves at the center of a media circus. Reporters knocked on doors, asking for interviews and angling for exclusive scoops. Network news crews set up cameras on the waterfront, hoping to capture a sighting live on television. Through it all, the reports kept coming in: strange lights, silent craft, objects that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As the sightings continued and the buzz around Gulf Breeze grew, comparisons to another famous UFO case began to surface: the events in Roswell, New Mexico, 4 decades earlier. Back in July 1947, Roswell Army Airfield had issued a press release claiming they had recovered a flying disc from a nearby ranch. The story made national headlines before the military changed its statement, saying the debris was merely from a weather balloon. But the initial announcement had already fueled a firestorm of speculation about government cover-ups and extraterrestrial visitors. Now, as the Gulf Breeze story unfolded, parallels began to emerge. Both cases involved a sudden wave of UFO sightings in a small American town. Both featured photographs of alleged alien aircraft, and both attracted the attention of the military and government investigators. During the Roswell incident, the Army Air Force had collected debris and sworn witnesses to secrecy. In Gulf Breeze, the military's role was less overt, but the presence of nearby Naval Air Station Pensacola and Eglin Air Force Base added a layer of intrigue. Rumors swirled about strange lights and unidentified radar contacts in restricted airspace. There was one key difference, however. While the Roswell incident had been largely contained and faded from public attention within weeks, the Gulf Breeze sightings continued for years, with new witnesses coming forward and new photographs and videos emerging regularly. In the decades between Roswell and Gulf Breeze, the U.S. Air Force had conducted Project Blue Book, an unofficial investigation into UFO sightings. From 1952 to 1969, Blue Book compiled reports on 12,618 sightings, ultimately deeming most of them explainable as natural phenomenon or misidentified man-made objects. Only a handful of cases, around 5%, were classified as truly unidentified. But critics of Blue Book argued that the investigation was more focused on debunking sightings than truly investigating them. And the Gulf Breeze case, with its multiple witnesses, detailed photographs, and sustained waves of activity, seemed to challenge the government's official stance that UFOs were not a genuine threat. As MUFON's investigators dug deeper into the Gulf Breeze sightings, they couldn't help but feel they were on the cusp of something historic. If the Gulf Breeze case could withstand the scrutiny that had unraveled so many other UFO incidents, it had the potential to rewrite everything the public thought it knew about the possibility of extraterrestrial visitors. But as the Gulf Breeze story continued to unfold, it would face its own challenges and controversies. The comparisons to Roswell and the legacy of Project Blue Book hinted at the difficulties ahead in bringing any UFO case, no matter how well documented, to a definitive conclusion in the public eye. The stage was set for a battle, not just over the skies of Gulf Breeze, but over the very nature of truth, belief, and the strange and often contested boundary between the known and the unknown. In 1990, the discovery of an unexpected object would shift the conversation in an entirely new direction. A contractor, renovating a home that had once belonged to Ed Walters, made a startling find. Tucked away in the attic was a small model, a craft constructed from paper plates, cardboard, and construction paper. It bore a striking resemblance to the object Walters had photographed, and its discovery raised immediate questions. Skeptics seized on the model as definitive proof of deception. If Walters had built a miniature version of the craft, it stood to reason that his photos were faked, his story a fabrication. The model's appearance sparked a media frenzy, with journalists eager to dismantle what had once seemed like an unshakable case. Walters, for his part, denied any connection to the model. He claimed it had been planted to discredit him, a convenient discovery designed to cast doubt over everything he had witnessed. His defenders pointed out that many of his sightings had been corroborated by independent witnesses, people with no ties to Walters who had seen and photographed similar objects. If the entire thing was a hoax, how could so many unrelated accounts align? Despite the ongoing debate, the damage had been done. The discovery of the model was enough for many to dismiss Gulf Breeze as another in a long line of UFO hoaxes. The credibility that had built up over years of reports, photographs, and investigations began to erode. Even some within MUFON, once the case's most vocal supporters, found themselves questioning whether they had been too eager to believe. For the people of Gulf Breeze, the fallout was immediate. What had once been a source of curiosity and excitement turned into something murkier, an uncomfortable reminder that truth and belief are often more complicated than they appear. Some residents distanced themselves from the case entirely, unwilling to be associated with what now carried the stain of controversy. Others dug in deeper, convinced that the discovery of the model was nothing more than a convenient excuse to discredit something unexplainable. As the 1990s progressed, the national spotlight moved on. UFO researchers turned their attention to new cases, new sightings, new mysteries. Gulf Breeze, once at the heart of it all, faded from the headlines. But for those who had seen something they couldn't explain, whether in the skies over the Panhandle or captured in the pages of Walter's photographs, the questions never truly went away. Because the sightings didn't stop. Even as the Gulf Breeze case faded from the headlines, the skies over the Panhandle remained restless. The debate over Ed Walters' photographs and the discovery in his attic had convinced many that the case was over, but in the years that followed, strange things kept happening, just without the same media spotlight. It was a summer afternoon in July of 1996, the kind of day Pensacola Beach was famous for. Clear skies, a crowded shoreline, and the thunderous precision of the Blue Angels cutting across the Gulf. Thousands of people had gathered for the air show. their eyes fixated on the spectacle overhead. But not everyone was looking in the same direction. Standing on a sand dune, a marine lifeguard scanned the horizon. He had spent the entire week watching the rehearsals and knew every maneuver by heart, which made it impossible to ignore that something was off. The formations were sloppy, the timing slightly wrong. And then, over the Santa Rosa Sound, something else caught his eye. A chrome sphere, motionless in the air. At that same moment, the airshow announcer's voice rang out. The performance was being temporarily halted due to an unidentified aircraft in the area. One of the Blue Angels broke formation, banking towards the object. The lifeguard followed the jet with his eyes as it closed in on the sphere, only to watch the unknown craft vanish in an instant, shooting upward faster than anything he had ever seen. That evening, local news reported an F-16 had crashed in a Pensacola neighborhood near the waters of Escambia Bay. The only thing separating that bay from Santa Rosa Sound? A thin stretch of land known as Gulf Breeze. The connection was never made publicly, but the lifeguard, trained to identify aircraft by sight and sound, was certain the events were linked. And then, 12 years later, it happened again. It was just before noon on May 17, 2008, when a battalion chief with the Gulf Breeze Fire Department stepped outside for a conversation with 3 of his men. The talk was easy, casual, until something in the sky caught his attention. A silver, oval-shaped craft was moving rapidly from the north, heading due south. Twice he called out for the others to look. Twice they glanced up but saw nothing. The third time, one of them finally caught it, just for a second, before the object was gone. He later said it looked like a feather, something so light it shouldn't have been able to move in a perfect straight line. But there was no sound, no contrail, nothing to explain what they had seen. By the chief's estimate, the object had traveled at least 20 miles in 15 seconds. And then, most recently, it wasn't a lone witness, it was a camera. On the night of January 28, 2025, a Reddit user sat watching the live feed from a beach webcam in Pensacola when something strange caught their eye. Lights moving against the dark sky. They grabbed their tablet, started recording, and caught 3 separate events in a single evening. The objects drifted slowly, almost imperceptibly, before disappearing from view. They posted the video online, where the comments quickly filled with speculation. Some dismissed it outright, others weren't so sure. And then a former Blue Angel chimed in, not only confirming that the squadron wasn't in town at the time, but also hinting that there had been an increase in military activity over the Gulf in recent months. Helicopters, patrols, movements that suggested something out there was drawing attention. For years, people had pointed to Gulf Breeze as a hoax, a case closed. But the skies over the Panhandle didn't seem to care what anyone believed, because whatever was out there, it never left. The debate over Gulf Breeze may have faded from the headlines, but for those who have seen something unexplainable, the conversation never really ended. Even after the photos, the investigations, and the supposed hoaxes, the reports kept coming. A lifeguard watching an airshow, a firefighter standing behind his station, a camera feed catching something moving through the night sky. Different people, different years, the same story. Moments like these don't fade. They linger, unanswered, unsettled. And in that silence, one question remains. What did I just see? Enjoy learning about Florida's strange history? Follow Mysteries of the Marsh on Instagram for photos, newspaper clippings, and deep dives into the stories we cover. New episodes drop every Saturday. Until next time, if you're on the beach late at night, look up. You never know what you might see. Till then, stay curious, and as always, don't feed the gators.